Hey guys, thanks for joining me once again. I hope you're all good. It's been a couple of weeks. I've had a bit of a whirlwind time over the last couple of weeks and I've not been able to get a podcast out, but I actually recorded this podcast last week. So my guest today is Ed Kressy. Ed is an entrepreneur, a volunteer first responder, a self-defense instructor, and also an author. However, his life hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows, let's say. Ed had an 11-year meth addiction, and it's really about how Ed has turned his life around to rehabilitate, to recover, to beat the addiction, which Ed has done via spirituality, self-improvement, and service to others, in his own words. Ed has literally turned his life around so much from having meth psychosis and thinking that he was a wanted man by the FBI to actually receiving the FBI Director's Community Leadership Award. So I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you guys take something away from it. It's never too late to turn your life around. Hey, Mr. Ed Kressy, thank you for joining me on the show today. How are you doing?
Great, Richard. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here.
Not a problem at all. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And you're joining us all the way from the United States of America. And you're currently in Massachusetts at the minute. Is that correct?
That's correct. I live in San Francisco. I'm currently in Massachusetts.
So the story behind that is it was kind of sociable, pleasure, going to see some family, and then you've kind of been stuck there because of the situation. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I came out here in early March to planning to spend a week or a couple of weeks. That, of course, was when things were nearly normal. Now I've been out here ever since. I fortunately am healthy. Fortunately, I'm doing well. Same for my family. My heart goes out to all of those who are struggling. My heart goes out to, and my prayers and best wishes are with those who are severely impacted by the virus. I hope we find an end to it soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's a scary thing. I mean, I don't know if you can tell in my voice, and I'm hoping not, and I didn't want to postpone this because I've actually postponed a podcast a couple of weeks back because I wasn't feeling very well. And then I started to get better. So we did the podcast. And then a couple of days prior to this, I've started not to feel well again. So I got advised to go for a COVID test. So I've been and had a test today. Weird experience, very strange experience. Not to just go too much into it, but it was almost like, the scenes in the films where, I don't know, like there's an outbreak or it's a sort of a zombie apocalypse, and there's always that place where everybody's heading for, where there's like the military there to save you and bring you in and sort of keep you sheltered and things like that. It was almost like that. It was at a football stadium, and I pulled into a car park, and there's military there. There's people in like hazmat suits and masks, gloves, everything. You can't pull your window down. You've got this shouting through the window to you, like instructions, and posting things through your opposite window, and it's like, wow, it was kind of really weird and strange, but also made you think how serious this is.
Well, I'll tell you, Richard, I hope you're okay. I'm sending good vibes and best wishes to you.
Thank you, man.
I got a call today from my first ever meditation teacher. This guy taught me how to meditate, big Zen practitioner for many, many years. He saved my life. And we can get more into the circumstances in a little bit, but basically I was suicidal at the time I met him. He instilled in me a belief in the afterlife. And he convinced me that if I were to take my life, it would set me back in the hereafter. Now, the point is, this meditation teacher, his words truly resonate with me. When he called me on the phone today, he told me something that's really sticking with me, which is that we have a couple of choices in life. We can turn our backs to the sun and stare at the shadow on the ground, or we can turn towards the light. And when we turn towards the light, it doesn't mean the shadow's not there. The shadow's still there, but we have a choice as to which direction we're going to face. And in these challenging times, in these times of uncertainty, those words of my Zen meditation teacher stay with me, and I choose as best I can to keep myself turned and pointed to the light. Doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with the shadow, but I focus on the warmth and the light of that sun.
It just goes to show. I mean, the fact that you're staying where you are. I don't know what the case is and how it is out in the States. If you can go back to, is it San Francisco where you're from, isn't it? So I don't know if that is the case that you can't go back, or if it's that you've chosen to stay where you are to make sure everybody else is safe.
I'm very fortunate. I could go back, yet the way the situation and the uncertainty is in San Francisco, what I have chosen to do is to continue my work being of service to persons who are or were incarcerated. I've done a lot of work volunteering inside maximum security prisons and in jails. Now, we can't do that now because of the lockdown. The prisons and the jails are not allowing visitors. Yet this kind of work I can do remotely. The other facet of my work is serving law enforcement. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I've developed, because of my history of criminal activity and because of my long history of drug addiction, and because of the fact that so many people who helped me come from backgrounds of law enforcement and incarceration, meaning of all the help I received, some of the most meaningful came from persons who are or were incarcerated and persons who are in law enforcement. So I found ways to bridge the gap between the two. I found ways to build bridges of trust between law enforcement and communities affected by incarceration. The point is, I chose to use my good fortune, to use the opportunities that I've been given to be able to stay in this very beautiful place in the country in Massachusetts and continue my work being of service to others and improving my communities the best way I can.
And I love that about you, and this is what we need to get into. So let's start talking about you. You've already addressed that you're a volunteer, first responder. You're also a self-defense instructor. You're a budding entrepreneur. You're even an author. You know, all these things, but it's a far cry from where you were in, what was it, like the late 90s, early 2000s sort of period?
Starting in 86 through 2007. Yes, I was...
oh, wow. It's a long period.
Decades, yeah, if you're telling me, yeah, Richard, I had a lot of good opportunities presented to me. The opportunities that were given to me were unfair, meaning they were the advantages that were bestowed upon me came as a result of my skin color, which is white, and my socioeconomic background, which is privilege. So in the United States and other parts, perhaps, of the world, someone like me who's white and of a privileged socioeconomic background, we get a lot of unfair advantages. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. I was very naive for many, many years. So while I had a college education, while I had a professional career, while I owned a home in San Francisco, rode a big BMW motorcycle, drove a Jeep Cherokee, I could go on, Richard. The point is, the whole while I was addicted to drugs.
And where did that all start? Because I know it's kind of one of them things, isn't it? People, you think about drugs, and you've just pointed out clearly there that you didn't have a bad start in life. You were what you'd call white privilege. You know, you had a good background. You were, you know, fairly well educated. I know a period of your life you was working at Genentech, who were one of the most successful, or voted as one of the best American businesses to work for. What was the trigger for the drugs? Was it recreational or was it like self-medicinal?
I had a dream from very early on in life. My dream was to write a book and to publish a book.
Okay.
Yet I never developed the discipline. I never developed the confidence. I never developed the belief in myself that I could achieve my dream and or that I was worthy of achieving my dream. There's many other factors that go into it. I was a bullied kid. I felt very ostracized in school. I had a lot of compulsions. I was a compulsive liar. I was a compulsive smoker. I was a compulsive masturbator. I was a compulsive eater. You know, I had all these compulsions.
Okay.
And basically, Richard, I had a lot of negativity towards myself. I hated myself, and I projected that onto the world around me. So you factor these and other things in. Basically, when I was drinking, when I was starting at 14, 15, and 16, when I became a heavy drinker, it gave me the illusion that I could be someone other than me. And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have quite a culture of that in the UK, actually drinking at the age of 14 and things. I did that myself, and that's quite, I think, very much so in the UK. It's almost normal, but I understand what you're saying. That built a bit of confidence inside you.
Exactly. It gave me the confidence. I never drank and did drugs, and I did a lot of drinking and I took a lot of drugs, but I never did those things to become a drunk or a high version of myself. I
Yeah.
did drugs to try and become someone completely different. And as we know, there are not enough drugs in the world to become a whole different person.
Sure.
We can destroy our old selves, which is what I was doing, not consciously, but subconsciously. I was destroying me in the hopes that I would become someone else. The path is a lie. The path is the one thing about drug addiction that I feel is important to understand is that for addicted people like me, drugs are not our problem. Drugs are our attempt at a solution. For me, my problem was me. My problem was who I was. My problem was I didn't pursue my dream. My problem was I had these compulsions. The problems go on and on. So I use drugs as an attempt to solve my problems. I use drugs as a solution.
And to get away from yourself, almost.
Exactly right, to get away from myself.
So you started at, what, 14, 15, 16 years old, just drinking, you was drinking alcohol, and then it led on to what, weed, I suppose, would probably be the first step into the world of drugs. How do you end up with crystal? Was it crystal meth or meth? I actually don't know much about meth because in the UK it's not so much of a thing as it is out in the US. I know it's huge. I mean, I was reading some facts about meth, and it was quite scary. But I didn't even hear of meth until probably, I don't know, 7 years ago maybe, when I started watching Breaking Bad. Over here it's not such a big thing, but I know that it's had some devastating impacts in the US.
You're lucky. You're lucky if you don't have it there. There's a great book called Meth Land, and I apologize because the author's name escapes me, but he puts forth the argument that the culture of America, the work ethic in America kind of fuels methamphetamine addiction. And if I remember correctly, he kind of says the reverse is true, because meth allows us to feel like we're being productive. Meth allows us to work many, many hours. Meth allows us to at least believe that we're accomplishing a lot of things. And for me, meth made me feel just like a Superman. I could just be a whole new person. To get to your question, I started drinking when I was 14. I started drinking very heavily when I was 16. At age 17, I progressed to, like you say, marijuana, and very quickly to cocaine, ecstasy, some psychedelics. What happened was the cocaine became too hard on me, meaning I would do so much coke that I believed I was having a heart attack. Every coke binge would end with me lying in bed trying to stave off the imminent aortic explosion I was sure was going to happen. It felt like I was so afraid I was going to have a heart attack. And at the same time, I became very, very paranoid. I used to lie in bed after a coke binge, believing the police helicopters were about to land on my roof and SWAT team agents were rappelling down the walls to smash through my windows. I mean, it's ridiculous, but this is how my life went for many years on coke. So as stupid as it sounds, meth was kind of a break from coke. The coke. So, I mean, these are the kind of decisions that addicted people make. These are the kind of bright ideas someone like me has. So I got into meth when I was 26 and was addicted till I was about 37. I was a binge user for at least for a while. I was able to maintain the facade of a quote unquote normal life, meaning I had the job at Genentech. They treated me very well. And Genentech, for those who don't know, you might have mentioned, Richard, but Genentech's a big biotech company in the San Francisco Bay Area. And as you mentioned, they were named the best company in America to work for by Fortune magazine. So they treated me. I had this job with a great company that treated me very, very well. They were in business to heal sick people. I had a hobby. I was an amateur kickboxer. I was never very good, but I trained a lot of kickboxing. I trained a lot of kickboxing in the gym. I even went to Bangkok, Thailand, Yeah,
nice.
I trained with some of the pros. That I wasn't
to be on Muay Thai there as well.
Oh yeah, okay. So beautiful, wonderful place. I had so much fun in Bangkok. And I trained with the pro kickboxers. I was never a pro myself, but I spent a few days, a week or so training with the pros. For me, it was like a fantasy camp. The point is, I had all these. I was piling up all these things, despite the fact I was addicted to meth and binging every weekend. My life became like a seesaw.
Yeah.
And I, looking back, I realized, and this is what the process of recovery teaches us, that a lot of the things I was doing, the Genentech, even to some extent the kickboxing, some of the other things, I was trying to convince myself that I was not addicted to drugs.
Yeah, because you were living almost a normal life, and it was almost just like a sociable thing, or I don't know, because obviously I don't know the story, but for the fact that you can actually function, there's certain drugs, like somebody's a heroin addict, for instance, they don't function that way. They can't go to work, they can't participate in sports, kickboxing, things like that. So I suppose that what you're saying with the likes of meth is that it's still allowing you to live an almost normal life, or appear that to other people that you're living a normal life, and there's nothing actually going on there.
Yes, and it appeared to me myself that I was living that normal life. So when I quit, when the doubts crept in, when I started to wonder, hey, are drugs, should I do something? I could say to myself, oh, wait a minute, I have a career with Genentech. I kickbox 6 days a week. An amateur kickboxer, a career Genentech employee, drug addicted people don't do these things, right? And I could ask myself, yeah. So that way I could kind of put up this facade that would convince the world and fool me into thinking that I wasn't using drugs as a solution to my problems.
So when you live in that life and you're doing your kickboxing and you've got a good job and everything, almost seems pretty good from the outside perspective. Why inside are you still not happy? What is it that's still driving you to want to get away from that person? Because we know how it is. I mean, a lot of kids struggle when they're young with who they are and they're trying to figure things out. And by this point, you're in your 20s, going on for your late 20s, and you're still, even though everything's good, like you say, you had certain cars and the house and the job and everything, you would think at that point you start to actually be more comfortable with who you are. But obviously not.
One might think, and one major reason was I never wrote my book. My passion, my dream in life is always to write a book, but I never even attempted, or what attempts I made were so limited as to barely be feasible. And then I wasn't a person whom I could like. I mean, I did a lot of very shameful things. I remember in college, I remember I was driving somewhere with my girlfriend, and a woman who was black stepped off the curb. Maybe she wasn't using the crosswalk. I called her a nigger, and I apologize for using shocking language, but I used the N-word as I wasn't, I didn't use the N-word repeatedly. I didn't join, an Aryan or a racist organization, but I said things and I thought thoughts that were
just like a sort of flippant thing that just kind of came out for whatever reason.
Yes, I said things and I thought thoughts that were basically racist. I still had my compulsions. I was a liar. I was a cheat. I would steal things. I would receive checks from my parents that, I don't know, they were probably intended for textbooks or rents. Certainly they were not intended for bar tabs and 8 balls of cocaine, but this is what I spent them on. So I would get high to bury the shameful things, like calling a woman the N-word, like spending my parents' money on cocaine. I would bury the shame of those things under intoxicants, and while I was intoxicated, I would do more shameful things, and the spiral just continued, man. And it got, Richard, it got to a point of sheer devastation. In 2003 or so, I graduated from snorting meth to smoking it. So now in 2003, I'm smoking methamphetamine.
So what's the difference there for, just to enlighten me a little bit, I suppose, because I don't really know too much about this type of drug. So from snorting it to smoking it, I understand the difference, but how does that affect you differently? Is that a bigger hit? Is that more addictive that way?
What I know about meth is that it is very damaging to the brain. It's full of
Mm,
neurotoxins. It's a very damaging drug. And in my particular case, what smoking meth did was to bring on psychosis.
right.
Psychosis.
Because I know that when you smoke, they say like it takes 7 seconds for the smoke to sort of hit your brain. That's with just normal cigarettes. I know that was something I heard a long time ago. Whereas if you're snorting it, maybe I don't know, that's just going into your nasal passage, and then maybe it's just going into your digestive system. Or
Yes,
I'm just trying to be scientific with it, but I could be totally wrong.
I believe what I do know is that for me, when I started smoking the meth, it brought on that psychosis, which is a form of paranoid schizophrenia. I believe methamphetamine psychosis mimics paranoid schizophrenia. I believed in conspiracy. I started smashing holes in my drywall and ripping apart my electronics and looking for and sometimes finding surveillance devices. I see
Right.
people stalking and following me, people searching through my trash, people attempting to break in or to my backyard.
So like a paranoia.
Intense, Richard, intense paranoia. I would call the
Right.
cops on myself. I would hear the disembodied voices threatening to kidnap and torture me to death. Ultimately, what happened was, if you recall my trip to Bangkok that I mentioned I took in 2000 when I was kickboxing, when I was there, in reality, when I was in Bangkok, I had a friend. His name is, we'll call him Omar. My friend Omar, he was my roommate while I was training in kickboxing. He was a Muslim man, a nice guy. He was of Middle Eastern descent and from France. What happened when I started to go into the meth psychosis was I came to believe that Omar, my friend from Bangkok, had actually been one of the 9/11 hijackers.
Wow. Okay.
So now, quickly, I go into this vast, incredible alternate reality in which the FBI is using all the resources at their disposal to try to pin 9/11 on me, believing that I had had something to do with helping or architecting, or at times I would believe the FBI had recruited me to be a top secret counterterrorism operative, and the disembodied voices I heard were a product of subliminal messaging and high frequency plasma ray audio transmissions from invisible stealth bombers. I mean, Richard, these are the theories of methamphetamine that I came up with. And everything, so many things I saw.
You're going to have an imagination for that, and I suppose if you're saying that you wanted to be a writer, you wanted to be an author, you wanted to write a book when you was a kid, you probably had an imagination anyway. So, the two combined kind of just seems like your mind went wild.
Well, that's very insightful, Richard. Yes, because when I was a kid, I loved to read. I would come home from the library with stacks of books, almost too high to see over. Because when I was a little kid, the world of imagination was always, to me, much more attractive than the world of reality. And I had a lot of books I was fortunate to have had a lot of books in the house growing up. So, Richard, you make a great point. Yes, that alternate world, the false reality, the conspiracy, the fact that I was a top secret undercover operative and had inadvertently befriended a 9/11 hijacker, or so I thought. All of this was a fantasy world that was terrifying. I was incredibly frightened. Much of the time, I had hatred and rage burning inside me that I projected onto the world around me. Although all that was true, in a way, I was very comfortable within that world because it was fantasy. It was a world that was all mine. It was a world that would not have even existed were it not for me, because the whole conspiracy I believed was out there revolved around me. It made a terrible, horrible world, but one in which I was extremely comfortable. That, combined with my poor decisions, made it very difficult for me to quit meth. I lived in this world of meth psychosis for 4.5 years.
Jeez. And at that point, I suppose you were way too far gone for, doing your normal day-to-day, working at Genentech and, all the normal stuff you were doing before. I suppose at this point now, this is where it's really going downhill and rapidly.
Oh, The wheels were coming off. Yeah, man. And I would go, during those 4.5 years, I would stay clean here and there. I did 60 days in jail and another 2 weeks in jail, and I wasn't able to get drugs in jail, so I was clean then. I went into rehab a couple times. I bounced in and out of rehab, but there was a period when Stanford University hired me. Stanford University, one of the finest academic institutions in the world, as far as a lot of people believe. They hired me. They gave me a chance. I stayed clean for, I don't know, a month, maybe a month and a half.
Yeah.
Then Stanford has this very unfair policy. You won't believe this. Stanford actually expects you to go to work and not stay home smoking methamphetamine. Can you believe that?
No way.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. What kind of university is that?
Come on. So the point is, Stanford quickly let me go. They will not consider
tolerate that
ever again. I'm lucky if I can even go within 10 miles of campus.
Wow.
But the point is,
so it's so self-destructive though. All these things are coming your way, and like a lot of people at this point are probably they wouldn't even get these kinds of opportunities. And you get clean for a month, you think, I'm here at Stanford. Look, there's these kind of moments where a lot of people would go, right, I've really kind of landed on my feet now. This is the time to stop all this. This is the time to get clean and move forward with life. And it's hard to believe that then you'd throw that away because you're just so self-destructive because you wasn't comfortable with who you were, and you just, there was so much self-hatred there.
I was self-destructive, and another problem too is I was living for myself, meaning I was living for a nice apartment on campus and for, I don't know, clothes to wear, money in the bank. I still never really even attempted pursuit of my dream of writing a book. I wasn't living for other people. I mean, you could argue that because I was working at the Stanford Cancer Center, I was doing something to help people who unfortunately are suffering from cancer. Yet much of my world was around selfishness. What I could get
so it was for the money more than helping people.
Exactly. And these things I didn't realize until I look back. So for a lot of us, addiction is a gift. Addiction is a twisted gift. It's a strange blessing because addiction pushes us along pathways we otherwise would never have undertaken. For me, it was a path of spirituality, meaning I came to believe in the importance of things of a spiritual nature, the things of a non-material nature. I made that my pathway. And when I finally did achieve my dream of writing a book, the book I wrote, and even when I look back, my dream of writing a book had always been, I want to sign books. I want people to ask me for my autograph. I want a bank account. I want to go on TV. Those were the real reasons back in the old days I wanted to publish a book. Yet when I finally wrote my book, the actual book that I did publish, this book is intended to help people. The book I published bridges gaps between law enforcement and communities affected by incarceration and addiction. The book I've published is a guide for others who are struggling with addiction or whose loved ones may be. So my book puts forth some type of value to the world around me. Not nearly as much value as Nelson Mandela's autobiography or any number of books by others who have recovered.
No, but but Nelson Mandela wasn't an addict, and he probably wouldn't be able to help meth addicts with his books. So everything has its place, and kind of like you say, it's that whole situation. Them 11 years of you go through that addiction were a blessing, a curse, and a blessing because in the end, from that you've been able to write a book, and without those 11 years, as bad as they were, you wouldn't have produced this book.
I would not have produced this book, and by no means am I suggesting anyone go out and intentionally become addicted, because there are much much better, easier ways to achieve one's dreams. But you're absolutely right. With the quote unquote benefit of 20 years of addiction, 11 of those years to meth, I am able to. It's like there's a beautiful story about a person who's walking in the woods and she encounters a butterfly but the butterfly is emerging from its cocoon.
Oh yes, I know the story.
The butterfly is struggling and struggling, and so she pulls out her knife and cuts the cocoon, intending to help the butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's that struggle from the cocoon that gives the butterfly's wings their strength. And the analogy is, we as human beings are like that butterfly. We struggle mightily, yet that struggle gives our wings the strength to carry us and to bring us to the places in life which will make us fulfilled as human beings and hopefully bring value to the world around us as well.
And so the end to that story was actually the butterfly died because it wasn't strong enough to be able to fly. And well, that was the version that I heard anyway. Because it didn't get that struggle, because it couldn't build that strength and grow the wings to fly, the butterfly actually ends up dying. So sometimes, if we're trying to do that nice thing and helping that person along, the struggle is what really made that person. And the same with your story there, it's made you who you are and allowed you to do the things that you've done past this awful period of your life. And, moving on, what you picked up on there about the spirituality, there's so much. A lot of people I speak to now talk about meditation, and it's something that it just keeps coming up on the podcast. And I'm like, mindfulness, all those kind of things. I actually had a Navy SEAL on the podcast a couple of episodes back. And he's got his own sort of mindfulness. He's a mindfulness teacher, and he's all about spirituality and that because of PTSD, what he suffered with, and now he's helping others as well. And it always seems like, going back to what you were saying about feeling happy or accomplished with what you was doing, like when it was all for money and when it was for yourself, those things, they weren't really. You didn't gain the benefits that you gain within yourself as you have when you've done things for other people. So through the path of self-improvement and spirituality, you've started to provide service to others through volunteering.
Absolutely.
This is the thing that I really want to sort of get into now, because it's an amazing thing, and we're all kind of, at some stage of our lives, we're all focused on ourselves, of course. We're living our own lives and we're with our families and things like that. But then, it's always nice to give back. But the lengths that you've gone to and other people that I've spoken to in the past, I think it's so inspiring.
Thank you. I was inspired by others. Incredible, amazing people saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. When I quit meth in 2007, I began working very, very hard. I began going to 12-step meetings, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 12-step meetings in a single day. I worked at a Christmas tree lot. It was around the holidays. So here I am, having had a career at the best company in America to work for. Now I'm hauling Christmas trees and tying them with twine on the tops of people's car for $5 tips. But, I was still inspired to work. I knew at some level that life of methamphetamine was going to get me either locked up, covered up, like 5 feet of earth, 6 feet of earth covered up, or sobered up. Those are my only choices. But the point is, I began working very, very hard, and amazing people saw something in me. They inspired me to volunteer. I became a volunteer for the Red Cross doing disaster preparedness instruction. I became a volunteer for the fire department as a first responder. And these things are what eventually, at the same time, after I quit meth, I discovered that just because you're done with drugs doesn't mean drugs are done with you.
Which is the title of the book, right?
It's the subtitle of the book, exactly. I continued to experience this deep paranoia about the FBI. Even years after I was clean off meth, I continued to hear disembodied voices. And to this very day, I hear disembodied voices from time to time. And now I understand to look at these disembodied voices as channeling spirits, whispers of angels, or something. Which we have different explanations. The point is, hearing disembodied voices today, I've found to be a blessing. I've learned to work with them rather to see them as the enemy. But going after I quit methamphetamine, I still did shameful things. I remember at one point the FBI had this is in real life. The FBI had interviewed me about my friend Omar because I had submitted them so many tips about how I knew a guy, he looked like a 9/11 hijacker. Finally, the FBI called me in for an interview. What had happened was after I got clean off meth, and this is something I was ashamed of and am ashamed of, I wrote Omar an email telling him that the FBI had interviewed me about him for possible connection to terrorism. At the time, there were all these thoughts swirling through my head. It was still close to after having gotten clean off meth. I believed at times I was an undercover FBI operative. I believed a lot of different things. The point is, I lived in fear for years after that of being executed for treason or thrown in life or any number of things. The point is, and the reason it has a good ending is because my volunteer pathway through the Red Cross and through being a volunteer first responder, that got me to the point of having the confidence in myself to face my fears. And I actually became a volunteer for the FBI.
It's unbelievable.
Yes, I'm so fortunate. I'm so grateful to the FBI. I'm grateful to many persons in the police department too, but especially to the FBI because they gave me a second chance. They allowed me to attend and graduate from their selective Citizens Academy, which is a program like it sounds for civilians such as the civilians who go to the Citizens Academy are mostly people involved in public safety or security for tech firms, because I'm out in the San Francisco area where there's a lot of tech companies.
Yeah.
And, the FBI, I started with the FBI. I was teaching Krav Maga, which is similar to martial arts, an Israeli form of self-defense. I was able to...
I am familiar with that, yeah.
Okay, great.
I like martial arts myself, so I'm a big kind of UFC fan and stuff. So we could probably sit here and talk about that as well. But keep going with your story.
I love the UFC. Yeah, the UFC is great. I taught the FBI SWAT team, some of their members, some unarmed self-defense. I graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy. So much to the FBI's credit, they recognized the work I was doing. At the same time, I was on a parallel track. I had left my career in biotech in 2014. At the time they were treating me very well. I was no longer with Genentech. Genentech was long since in the rearview mirror. In 2014, I was working for a small biotech firm called Sorexa. They treated me very well. I was making the equivalent of a six-figure salary. But I had only I had only recently gotten over the suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, surely that's how that was like a mental effect. Because the first thing that I was thinking about was when you was talking about it. I know with the likes of psychedelic drugs, where people have done, I don't know, mushrooms, ecstasy, things like that, that even in later life they can experience these sort of psychedelic experiences again. Like, don't even know what triggers it. It's just something happens, and then they can start experiencing those same kind of things like when they've taken those drugs. That's the first thing that came into my head. But then I thought about, you were saying that you smoked it, and the things that it could have done to your mental health. There, have you found that that's something that it's had a bit more of a lasting impact?
Absolutely. I believe the methamphetamine has had a lasting impact. I believe to this day I experience crushing episodes of depression, anxiety. I choose not to use medication. It's just my personal choice. Instead, I pursue a path of a lot of meditation, a lot of spirituality.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I feel even to this day, I'm 12 years clean off meth, that the damage that the meth did cannot be completely undone.
So for people that are sort of trying to rehabilitate, I think it's one of those things. I used to smoke myself, and I know even just cigarettes, nicotine, like it's so easy to want to just have another cigarette, even though, it doesn't matter if you've been quit for 7 years, 10 years. I know people have been quit for 15 years and then gone back to it and started smoking full time again. The road to recovery is surely long. How do you kind of stay on the straight and narrow and not veer off track?
Spirituality, self-improvement, and service to others. The three S's. If whatever I'm doing falls into one or more of those categories, probably it's going to help me in my continued recovery and my continued staying off of methamphetamine or other drugs. If whatever I'm doing pursues a spiritual pathway, if it's somehow being of service to others, and or if it's improving me as a human being, then it's probably a good, worthwhile thing to be doing.
And you find that, you know, the service to others, that's what really makes you happy. That's the thing that kind of, I don't know, feeds your soul.
The service to others, yes, that takes me out of myself. That solves the problem that I was using drugs as a solution for. You know, for example, I do a lot of work serving persons who are or were incarcerated. I've got several times on weekends into maximum security prisons in California. I've sat down.
Is this the Defy Ventures program?
Yes, the Defy Ventures, and then I'm part of another wonderful organization called Hustle 2.0. They do similar work.
No, that's excellent. It's great work. You know, really, you know, looking at the things you do, and it's so selfless. And you know, you talk about shame, and you talk about yourself, self-hatred, and all those things in your past. And actually, you should be really proud of who you are.
Indeed, so I don't entertain thoughts of doing drugs anymore. It's not something that's really on my radar. It's not something I want to do. I learn things such as when I'm in. I've gone a couple times to Pelican Bay State Prison, which is one of the most notorious maximum security prisons in California. When I was there, I sat down with men who are considered the very worst of the very worst. This is the label society's put on these men. These are men who are incarcerated, having been convicted of violent crimes, murder in many cases. These are men who are almost all gang affiliated, meaning they come from the Crips or the Bloods or the Aryan Brotherhood or the Norteños. But Richard, I sit down and I talk to these men, and this is the experience with the others I volunteer with also. I believe, and this does not speak to the entire incarcerated population in America, the men I work with self-select as applying themselves very hard to transformational programs of employment and entrepreneurism and personal development. Yet I found these men, if they'd been given the same opportunities as they would have turned out fine.
Okay, so the sort of product of their environment, their upbringing, and didn't have that same start in life that maybe people like yourself have had.
Exactly. These are men who they would open their front doors when they were 8 years old to find someone bleeding to death from a stab wound on their porch. There was a man.
Just terrible, scarring experiences.
Indeed. Yeah, there was a man who his father, when the man was 6 years old or something like that, his own father, shot to death another man right in front of him, so the father could show the boy how it was done. You know, these are the experiences the men had. And if I was given where I grew up in the countryside of Massachusetts, we had gangs of turkeys and wild turkeys and deer. You know, those are the kinds of. But you know, had I grown up in a place where my options were to either join the street gang or get stomped by the street gang, I don't look back upon myself as having had the courage not to join a gang. And Rich, by no means do we excuse the crimes committed by persons like me who made mistakes. By no means do we excuse the acts that we committed. Yet, when we look at people who, as they are today, who are working to transform their lives and turn their lives around, these are the lessons they impart on me, they being incarcerated men and women, because I work with a lot of incarcerated women. The lessons they impart on me are a true blessing, are a true gift. They teach me things about humanity. Incarcerated sisters and brothers whom I work with teach me things about themselves and myself. And this process of being of service to others, the way that I maybe bring some small amount of good to their lives, yet certainly they bring a vast amount of good to my life.
Yeah, that's an amazing way of putting it, and it's an amazing way of looking at things. Like, because, as you say, the way these people are spoken about, some of the worst people in America, or just however it's put, because of the things that they've done, but not actually looking past it, looking into the reasons why. And I suppose there's a lot on the government there. There's a lot to be said about what the government doing about people having to live in this kind of and grow up in these environments and gangs and shootings and all those kinds of things. Yet you've not let that kind of divide your opinion, and you've gone in to help these people, and in return you're getting help back from them. That's just a great thing. So it's a great way of looking at it, and it makes complete sense now you explain it why you do these things, because because of the struggles that you've had and the things that you are facing, issues you have mentally. It's a two-way thing. You're not just giving to them, you are, which is great, but you're also taking something from them, which and not that you're taking anything that's monetized or anything like that. That's the best thing. It's you're taking something which is more spiritual, as you've said. It's eternal. It's something that you're feeding your soul and making you a better person.
To come from a spoiled, rich, white college kid who called a woman a nigger because she walked too close to his car, to have come from that place of deep shame of having done something and said those words, as shameful as it is, as wrong as my words were, and to come from the place of having done other things that were just as shameful, if not more so, to volunteering my time working with persons of color, because in our unfair American society, most of the incarcerated population is persons of color. So to be able to transform my life from back then to where it is today, I tell you, I still have a long way to go. I've got a lot of improving to do. I've got a lot more bridges of trust to build. I've got a lot more people to serve. Yet it's a beautiful thing to have received so much help from so many people and to have come this far.
We've all got work to do, but you're certainly on the right track and you're heading in the right direction constantly. So as long as you keep yourself on that track and keep moving that way, I don't see any problems for you moving forward. And like I said, I've got a lot of respect for what you do to turn your life around that way. It's amazing, and what you're doing is absolutely amazing. So yeah, keep going, man. Be proud of yourself.
Thank you so much.
No problem at all. I mean, before we finish, I think it's just important while we're talking about certain subjects like this, just really about self-help, about moving on. I know you picked up on a few things, but there was a question that I seen that you was talking about being asked, which is what you'd call a controversial method to helping others, I suppose. Have you got an answer for that? What is that sort of controversial method?
The best way I've found to help others who are struggling with addiction is really to help ourselves first. We've got to get ourselves on that right path before we can effectively help others a lot of times. And an addicted person is like a tornado. An addicted person is like a vortex that cuts a path of destruction. And as addicted people, we tend to draw others into our vortex. So as someone trying to help, you need to first not get sucked into that tornado of destruction that we as an addicted person create. Then you want to create a counter vortex. And hopefully your counter vortex will draw the addicted person out of their realm of poor choices and mistakes.
Okay.
So, really the best way to help others is often to help ourselves first. So model the behavior that you want to see in others. If you want to see an addicted person practice self-improvement yourself.
Yeah.
Most importantly, I think, if you imagine driving in the United States from New York to San Francisco, if you want to do that, if you want to undertake a drive from New York to San Francisco, you are going to need a map, right?
Sure.
You need other things too. I mean, you could conceivably look at the sun and kind of gauge where west is and roughly head west and figure that until you hit the Pacific Ocean and it's either north or south. And you could conceivably get to San Francisco, but it's going to be very, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, just to put into perspective, because I suppose a lot of my listeners are UK based, there is a few Americans. How long is that drive?
That's a 3,000-mile drive.
Okay, so yeah, you're definitely going to need some maps, and you're going to need some stops along the way for some gas, as you'd call it, or we call it fuel, petrol, diesel, whatever. A lot of things you're going to need along that route, definitely.
Well, the point is that a lot of persons who have a loved one struggling with addiction who contact me, they're like that driver who's not using a map.
Yeah.
They're making things very hard on themselves because they're trying to figure their own route and to make it up as they go along. Many people have escaped addiction. There's a lot of great books out there. There's an excellent book by Mary Carr. It's called Lit, L-I-T, about how she escaped alcoholism. There are many books out there by people who have overcome the same obstacles that you're trying to help someone overcome. And these books serve as maps. And there's not only, but books are great because you can really get immersed into a person's story and kind of see the nuances of thought and the various approaches that did and didn't work. But books are not the only way. Find other people who have done what you are trying to help your loved one do. Find others who have escaped addiction, who have escaped alcoholism, who have escaped compulsive behaviors or addictive behaviors, and talk to them about how they did it. And going back to our map analogy, there's not one and only one route to get from New York to San Francisco, right? You can go anywhere. You can go up to Canada, the beautiful country of Canada. You can go down to the amazing American Southwest. Find what routes might be available to you and choose the one that's going to work best for you. But the only way you're going to be able to do that, or at least one of the only ways, is to have that map. And persons who have overcome drug addiction, persons who have overcome alcoholism, who tell their stories effectively via books or being talks or via conversations, they can provide you with that map you need. Don't try to just do it on your own, making it up as you go along. It's like trying to get from New York to San Francisco, just attempting to follow.
Okay. So people who've set the blueprint, people who've been there and they've done it and they've come through the other side, people like yourself.
People who've set the blueprint. Yeah, I'm one of many. There are many stories, and many people far more eloquent and far more well written, or who can write more effectively than I. Their stories are beautiful and they can help you. Their stories can help you.
Yeah, but it's not all about having a beautiful story. Sometimes the ugly stories are the best ones as well. People talk about things in a more eloquent way that might not appeal to certain people. I think that it's good that you're raw and you're very honest with everything. And what one of the biggest things is you're taking from all this, like you're now take accountability for all of those things and all of those mistakes. And I think that's probably a huge step in the direction that you need to be moving in.
It's no good walking around having to hide yourself. It's no good walking around knowing there are parts of yourself that if anybody found out about, you would be deeply ashamed. I'm not. There's many things about myself I'm not proud of. There's a lot of things you don't necessarily want to know about. But I can say that honestly, there's nothing I've done that I'm not comfortable talking about. There's nothing I've done that I won't speak about. I mean, I won't. I don't want to burden you with my past mistakes and my past poor decisions, of which there are many. But I've come to a point where I can look at the person I was, see how I've transformed, see the help I've received, and know that, yeah, just like that spoiled college kid who used the N word, like the guy who wrote the email to the person who thought might have been a terrorist and told the FBI his friend looked like a terrorist, the person who spent huge amounts of money on the methamphetamine trade, which poisons the environment and takes parents from their children, the guy who drained the resources of welfare and the court system and law enforcement. I did all those things and much more. I got behind the wheel, intoxicated countless times, much more. I did much more than that, yet I can look at all of that and I can say that I've found ways to use all those things as a blessing because I can bring a measure of good to the world around me.
And hey, man, we all make mistakes and we all do crazy things. And, as long as we learn from those mistakes, I think that's the most important thing. So nothing to be ashamed about. And like you say, you're comfortable talking about those things because you know that's not you anymore.
They say we're only as sick as our secrets. We're only as sick as our secrets. So, we've all made mistakes. And my mistakes, I felt that, I believed I was going to be convicted of treason if anybody found out about this email I had written my friend Omar. If I can get past the point of believing at a core level, reality is what it is, reality delusions, but I believed at a core level I might be convicted of treason. If I can get past that to be forthcoming, then whatever you, the listener, might have experienced in your life that you have a reticence to talk, or that you don't feel comfortable talking about, hopefully, like so many people have inspired me, maybe I've done some small thing to inspire you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you have. You've inspired me just from looking at your story before we even spoke, and the things you said, and the movements you're making. I think it's amazing, and we can all learn from that. We can all be inspired by that. So I suppose it's a good time to wrap up. But what I want to do is just quickly get some socials from you. So where can the listeners find you? Obviously, you're doing a lot of good work, so people might hear this podcast and go, "Do you know what? I want to learn more about Ed." Put it all out there. If you leave it with me now, and then I'll put it in the bio as well.
Thank you so much. You go to my website, www.edkressy.com. That's www.edkressy.com. You can get a free PDF on 10 suggestions for what you can do if a loved one is struggling with drug addiction, or if a loved one's in recovery. You can sign up for my newsletter, and you can get a copy of my book.
That's awesome, Ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
No problem, man. Take care.
Take care.